So now that you have won your proposal, your organization has been authorized to start doing work and hopefully has received funding. But the big question is who within your organization is going to be doing some of the work and who within your organization has the ability to make decisions. So some of the activities in phase 2 project setup is establishing a governance structure, and we're going to distinguish between governance and management. We're going to officially authorize the start of the project using something called a charter. It's going to help document the approval and also clarify scope, schedule, and resources. It's also going to include tolerance and authority for decision making and changes. It's a little bit of risk and control, and because it has a lot of those key pieces of information, including, in addition to that, a summary of the project description and scope and team members, it's a great way to communicate the project launch. But that's later on in some of these modules. Right now, I do want to focus on the different governance structures you can have on a project, which is really important because just like when you begin a game, it's important to really know who can make decisions and who is playing what role. So let's clarify some terms here. Management refers to authority, tolerance, and accountability. When we say authority, it's really referring to who has the power to make decisions and within what tolerance levels. So what is a tolerance level? Well, the tolerance level is the performance limits within which the project manager can retain autonomy or for anyone, not just the project manager, but the performance limits within someone can retain autonomy. So that's PMD speak for how can you make decisions and at what level. We often have these levels defined by our HR department, mostly based around finance. For instance, you may know that you have the ability to make decisions that will cost the organization $5,000 or less, and when it's above $5,000, when a change or decision is going to cost the organization more than $5,000, then you have to escalate that to another level. And those are usually pre-established, usually in a delegation of authority. If you don't know where that is in your organization, try to look for it because I'm pretty sure it exists. So we're often really good at deciding what performance limits we have based on finance, but what we often don't know is what performance limits do I have to make changes on schedule and scope. So that's something that this conversation and captured in the project charter can help you figure out. When we say accountability, we're really talking about who has the accountability for the overall success of the project, and that really is the project manager in this sense. They're not doing all the work, but they are accountable for the success or failure of that project. So when the day ends, they will be the ones getting the phone call, for better or for worse. So that's management. Governance structure refers to the management structure within which decisions are made, so specifically about decisions. That's what we mean when we say governance structure. Now these structures can take several forms. The first form is the sponsor model. The sponsor model is usually an executive or a supervisor, somebody above the level of the project manager who can help them make decisions. So in other words, they have a higher tolerance for decision making and a higher performance limit that they can make those decisions. So as a project manager, you will escalate decisions and changes to your sponsor. If I have my ability or authority exceeded, for instance, if this is a situation or a change that is going to cost the organization above $5,000, it's exceeding my tolerance level that's been set by my organization, and therefore I need to escalate that to my sponsor to help me make that decision. And in return, that sponsor will help you secure resources within the organization for your project. They will do their best to be champions of your project and secure organizational commitment. They will also provide you with insights and directions. As a senior person within the organization, they can provide some guidance and also advisement, mostly around project management systems. So some of the pros of a sponsored model is that you have quick decisions because it's one person and it's a very simple structure. You're very clear on the ability to make decisions and when your sponsor may have to escalate some of the decisions or changes. However, a single person fails to see multiple perspectives because they exist within a single unit. They see your project within the lens of that unit, and they also have limited reach to secure some resources. So when there's higher budget or high levels of risk, a sponsor model might not be appropriate. There's a board model. So when there's a high risk, or when there is a high budget level, or other characteristics that your organization can set, you might want to include a board model which is composed of several individuals. Now there's no set number of individuals that should be on a board. However, there should be three main perspectives that are represented. The first is the senior executive perspective. This is someone within the organization that is looking at your project from the lens of the organization. And they are going to look at the changes and decisions and the performance of your project and how it incorporates into the strategy of the organization and how it supports some of those initiatives. There should also be a senior supplier perspective, and this is somebody who is representing the perspective of those providing services to your project. That could be anything from your project team itself to any suppliers or partners that are providing resources, both material and human. Could be subcontractors, for instance, that are actually doing some of the work. So their perspective should be represented when you make decisions or changes. And lastly, there should be a senior user perspective, so someone that is representing the perspective of those receiving the services or the beneficiaries. Now ideally you'd have each of these roles filled by a representative from these groups. You would have a beneficiary represented, you would have a senior supplier or partner represented, and you'd have an executive represented. However, that's not always possible, so there could be other people that could fill these perspectives. So in other words, there could be a board composed of all people within your organization, but some people that are representing the specific perspectives outlined here. Again, there's no specific size of the board that you should have, but just note that the more people on a board, the more difficult the decisions will be. The people on the board can be rotated in and out, so you can change some of the members of the board. And this is done usually based on skill set. For instance, in the very beginning of a project, I could have somebody that was an engineer to help me in the design process, to oversee changes during the design of the strategy or the intervention. Later on in the project, I could rotate that person out and bring in somebody that will help me with community sustainability, who may be an expert there. So they will help guide decisions and other changes based on community sustainability. So some of the pros of a board model is that they represent multiple perspectives, and they'll give you a better sense of what is the best decision or the best change that will satisfy all stakeholder needs. They can also secure more resources because you could have multiple people within your organization on your board, and so they could find ways to save money or to change budget or to supply budget. If it's a partner, they could find ways to help you with cost and other ways to support more human and financial resources. However, because there are several individuals, it can slow the decision-making process. And because instead of just popping into the office of your sponsor, you'll have to have multiple people attend a session, you'll have to develop formal relationships and formal meetings, and it can be a little bit more challenging to develop a relationship with all of these people, have them meet on a regular basis. Even though, just like the sponsor model, they are supplying organizational commitment and resources and advisement to you as a project manager as you escalate those decisions and changes. One thing I do want to note is that the project manager is not a member of the board. And this is self-evident because the board is there for when the project manager's tolerance has been exceeded. So as a project manager, if I can make a change or I can make a decision, it does not need to be escalated to the board. So therefore, a project manager is not a member of the board. We'll continue this discussion, and later on we'll talk about some use cases and some practical applications of both the sponsor and board model, so stay tuned.